I raised my glass to 30 years on the job, the ice clinking like a quiet applause. Then the room tilted, and my daughter-in-law's smile stayed perfectly still. On a humid Friday night in a rented hall off Route 9, a man on the edge of retirement learns that celebrations can curdle fast, especially when family secrets are poured heavy and nobody's watching the bar. The ice clinked once when I lifted the glass. Sounded like a period at the end of a long sentence. If you're here listening with me, take a second to hit like and subscribe. It helps these quiet stories find the folks who need them. All right, let me take you back. The hall smelled like lemon cleaner and sheet cake frosting, that fake vanilla kind that sticks to the back of your throat. Folding chairs scraped against the floor every time somebody shifted their weight, metal legs complaining like old knees, which felt fitting. We were all getting older in that room. A banner hung crooked over the far wall, Happy Retirement in blue letters that had already started peeling at the corners. Someone tried to tape it straight but gave up halfway through. That told you everything you needed to know about the night. Good intentions, low energy. I stood near the refreshment table, one hand in my pocket, the other wrapped around a plastic cup sweating on my palm. 30 years on the job. Same building, same commute, same clock-in time that never cared how I felt that morning. I should have felt lighter. That's what everyone said. You must feel free now. You finally made it. Bet you're sleeping better already. Truth was, I felt tired. Not the bad kind, the earned kind. Like when you shut off the porch light after a long day and stand there for a second in the dark, listening to the bugs. That kind of tired. My coworkers drifted in little clusters, laughing at stories we'd all heard before. The broken copier, the fire alarm incident, that one winter the heat went out and nobody went home anyway. We laughed like it mattered, like we were already halfway gone. Paper plates sagged under slices of cake cut too big. Someone brought potato salad that sat untouched, sweating in its bowl. The radio played low in the corner, an old station nobody had bothered to change. Soft rock from another decade, the kind of music that doesn't ask much of you. I kept scanning the room without meaning to, just checking, like a habit I hadn't broken yet. That's when I noticed her. My daughter-in-law moved through the crowd like she was hosting the whole thing, not rushing, not hovering, just present everywhere. A refill here, a laugh there. Her heels made a soft clicking sound on the floor, steady and confident. She looked good, too good for a rented hall with flickering lights. Hair done, lipstick just a shade darker than polite. Smile easy and wide, but sharp around the edges. She topped off my boss's drink, leaned in close when he said something, laughed a little louder than the joke deserved. Her hand rested on his arm half a second longer than necessary. Nobody noticed, or maybe they did and didn't want to. I told myself I was imagining things. That's what retirement does, right? Makes you suspicious of empty space. My son stood near the window, phone in his hand, nodding along to a conversation he wasn't really in. He looked tired too, different kind, the kind you carry when you're trying to keep everyone happy at once. I caught his eye and lifted my cup in a small toast. He smiled back, the kind of smile you learn early. Practice makes it automatic. The ice in my drink had already gone cloudy, melting faster than it should have. The room felt warm, even though the AC rattled in the corner, working overtime. Lights buzzed overhead, too bright, washing everything in a pale yellow glow. I took a sip, just enough to wet my mouth. Something tasted off. Not bad, just wrong. Like when milk is about to turn but hasn't yet.
a sweetness that didn't belong. I looked down at the cup, watching the ice swirl slow. Condensation dripped on the table, darkening the paper beneath it. My fingers felt thick around the rim. "Everything okay?" she asked. She was right there. I hadn't heard her approach. She'd refilled my glass when I wasn't looking. "Yeah," I said, too quick. "Just warm in here." She nodded, smile still in place, didn't reach her eyes, didn't move her feet. "Well, you deserve a good drink tonight." Her voice was smooth, careful. She squeezed my shoulder, light, almost affectionate. Then she was gone again, weaving through the room like smoke. My chest tightened, just a little, like I'd taken a shallow breath without meaning to. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves, big night. Endings always mess with your head. Applause broke out near the cake table. Someone tapped a fork against a plate. Speech time. I didn't want one, never did, but there I was, standing up anyway, everyone turning to me, clapping like I'd just finished a marathon instead of showing up to work every day. I said the right things, thanked the right people, joked about sleeping in. My voice sounded steady, even to me, but the room felt tilted, not spinning, just slightly off level, like a picture frame hung crooked that nobody bothered to fix. I noticed my heartbeat in my ears, slow, heavy. The lights seemed brighter now, edges too sharp, faces too close. I took another sip without thinking, this one deeper. The taste hit harder, that same sweetness, thicker now, almost syrupy. My stomach turned, not pain, pressure. I paused mid-sentence, fingers tightening around the cup. "Dad?" my son said. I smiled at him, because that's what you do. "Just a second," I said. My tongue felt slow, like it had to think before moving. I set the cup down on the table, watched my hand do it like it belonged to someone else. The applause came again, polite and warm. Someone shouted congratulations, someone else whistled. My daughter-in-law stood near the back, arms crossed, watching me. Her smile hadn't changed, not one bit. I swallowed. My throat felt dry now, too dry for how much I'd just drunk. The floor beneath my feet felt farther away, like there was an extra inch between me and the ground. I stepped back from the table, just one step. The room swayed. Not enough to alarm anyone, enough that I noticed. I laughed it off, made a joke about needing to sit down before I embarrassed myself. People laughed with me because they always had. I lowered myself into a folding chair. The metal was cold through my pants. The chair creaked like it remembered every other tired body that had sat there. My heart thudded once, then again, heavy, deliberate. I looked at my hands. They didn't look like mine, a little pale, a little shaky. The music in the corner sounded muffled now, like it was coming from another room, another building. My daughter-in-law turned away, already talking to someone else, already done with me. I told myself I was overthinking, that retirement nerves and cheap booze were a bad mix, that I just needed air. But that tight feeling in my chest didn't ease. It settled in, like it planned to stay. I stared at the cup on the table, ice almost gone now, liquid still, waiting. And for the first time that night, I wondered not what was in the drink, but why she'd been the one so eager to hand it to me.
The drink tasted like metal and sugar at the same time, like pennies left too long on the tongue, like cough syrup you're not sick enough to need. I didn't react right away, just stood there, cup halfway to my mouth, letting the aftertaste settle. My brain tried to place it, tried to be polite about it. The room kept humming, not loud, just busy. Too many voices overlapping, laughter stacking on laughter, the soft rock station bleeding through it all like background static. the kind of noise you stop noticing after a while. I lowered the cup and watched it sweat in my hand. Condensation slid down the plastic in slow lines, gathering at the bottom before dripping onto the table. One drop, then another. Each one felt louder than it should have. My fingers tingled, not numb, not painful, just aware of themselves. I flexed them once, subtle. Nobody noticed. Why would they? Across the room, my son threw his head back laughing at something one of my coworkers said. His mouth was wide open, eyes squeezed shut, that same laugh he'd had since he was a kid. Full-bodied, unbothered. I remember thinking how strange it was that he looked so solid, so grounded, like gravity still worked on him. I took a breath through my nose. The air smelled like frosting and floor cleaner and warm bodies. Normal. All of it normal. I told myself the drink just hit wrong. Cheap liquor does that sometimes, especially when you haven't eaten enough, especially when you're tired. I set the cup down on the table beside the cake knife. My hand lingered there a second longer than planned, fingers splayed flat against the laminate. The surface felt slick, cool. When I straightened up, the room shifted. Not a spin, more like a slide, like everything moved an inch to the left without asking me first. I blinked once, then again. The edges of the room softened, not blurry exactly, just smeared, like someone had dragged a thumb through wet paint. I swallowed. My throat felt thick, sticky. "You okay?" someone asked. I turned toward the voice too fast. The motion pulled at my stomach, a slow, heavy lurch. "Yeah," I said. The word came out fine, sounded like me, but it took effort, like pushing through water. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other and immediately regretted it. The floor dipped, not visibly, just enough that my knees stiffened on instinct. That's when the thought crept in, quiet, uninvited. This isn't right. I gripped the edge of the table, the metal trim pressed cold into my palm. I focused on that, the temperature, the texture. The hum of the room grew louder, or maybe my head grew quieter around it. Hard to tell. Someone clapped again near the back, another cheer, another laugh. My daughter-in-law stood near the drink table, pouring something clear into a fresh cup. Her movements were smooth, practiced. She didn't look at me. I watched her hands, the way she tilted the bottle, the way she stopped pouring without measuring, confident. A small knot formed low in my stomach. Not fear, not yet. Suspicion feels different when it starts, smaller, colder. My fingers tingled more now, like they'd fallen asleep and were waking up all at once, pins and needles without the pins. I curled them into fists, then let them go. Slow. The room felt farther away, like I was standing behind a sheet of glass, watching myself participate. I tried to take another breath. It came shallow, uncooperative. My heartbeat felt loud again, slow thuds spaced too far apart. I counted them without meaning to. 1, 2, 3. The lights overhead flickered, or maybe they didn't. Maybe that was just my eyes. I glanced down at the cup I'd set aside. The ice had shrunk to thin, cracked shapes, floating uselessly. What exactly did she pour? The question didn't come with panic, just clarity. I replayed the moment in my head, her stepping in close, the way she'd spoken, smooth, careful. "You deserve a good drink tonight." I pushed away from the table, slow, deliberate.
The distance between me and the chair nearby looked longer than it should have been, like a hallway stretched in a dream. I took one step, then another. My balance lagged behind me, like my body was half a second late to its own movements. I reached the chair and sat down harder than intended. The metal legs screeched against the floor, loud and sharp. A few heads turned. "You all right there?" someone said, half joking. I nodded, smiled, because that's what you do when you don't have proof yet. The chair felt too solid, too real against my legs. My vision narrowed a little, like the room was being gently squeezed from the sides. Faces blurred at the edges. The center stayed clear, almost painfully so. I could see my son perfectly, still laughing, still unaware. I thought about calling his name, just to hear it, just to anchor myself, but my mouth felt heavy. Words lined up slower now. I rested my elbows on my knees and leaned forward. The position helped. A little. The hum of the room dipped, then swelled again, like a wave passing through me. Someone brushed past my knee. The contact startled me more than it should have. My skin felt too sensitive. I looked up. My daughter-in-law again. This time she met my eyes. Just for a second. Her expression didn't change. Still pleasant, still polite. But there was something else there. Something watchful. "Want some water?" she asked. The question landed heavy. Water sounded good. Safe. "Yeah," I said. The word came out slower this time. She nodded and walked away before I could say anything else, already moving, already in control of the space. I followed her with my eyes as best I could. The room shifted again, a gentle sway. My stomach rolled, not nausea, pressure. I wiped my palms on my pants. They were damp, cold. The sound of liquid pouring reached me, clear, steady. I thought about the taste again, that wrong sweetness, that metal edge. Pennies, cough syrup, the kind of thing that doesn't belong at a celebration. My chest tightened, just a notch, like a belt pulled one hole too far. I tried to take a deeper breath. It didn't quite reach the bottom. The water arrived in front of me. Clear plastic cup, no ice this time. She set it down carefully, didn't touch me. "There you go," she said. I looked up at her face, really looked. Her smile was still there, but her eyes flicked past me, toward my son, toward the room, checking. I wrapped my hand around the cup. The plastic crinkled slightly under my grip. I hesitated. That hesitation felt loud, like a warning bell only I could hear. She waited, patient. I took a small sip. Water, plain, clean. Relief washed through me so fast it almost made me dizzy. My shoulders dropped without permission. "Better?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, and this time it was almost true. She nodded and walked away before I could say anything else, already moving, already in control of the space. I followed her with my eyes as best I could. The room shifted again, a gentle sway. My stomach rolled, not nausea, pressure. I wiped my palms on my pants. They were damp, cold. The sound of liquid pouring reached me, clear, steady. I thought about the taste again, that wrong sweetness, that metal edge. Pennies, cough syrup, the kind of thing that doesn't belong at a celebration. My chest tightened, just a notch, like a belt pulled one hole too far. I tried to take a deeper breath. It didn't quite reach the bottom. The water arrived in front of me. Clear plastic cup, no ice this time. She set it down carefully, didn't touch me. "There you go," she said. I looked up at her face, really looked. Her smile was still there, but her eyes flicked past me, toward my son, toward the room, checking. I wrapped my hand around the cup, the plastic crinkled slightly under my grip. I hesitated. That hesitation felt loud, like a warning bell only I could hear.
She waited, patient. I took a small sip. Water. Plain. Clean. Relief washed through me so fast it almost made me dizzy. My shoulders dropped without permission. "Better?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. And this time, it was almost true. She nodded and walked away. I watched her go, my eyes struggling to keep focus. The room swayed again, slower now. The water helped, but whatever had settled in me didn't leave. It stayed, quiet, working. I sat there, breathing, letting the noise wash over me. Across the room, my son caught my eye again and lifted his cup in another toast, still smiling. I lifted mine back. Just water. The distance between us felt longer than before, like the floor had stretched while I wasn't looking. I looked down at my hands again. They were steady now, mostly. But the question wouldn't let go. It sat there, heavy and patient. What exactly did she pour? And why did my body know before my mind was ready to admit it? The floor was cold when I came back to myself. Not all at once, just enough to know my cheek was pressed flat against it. Linoleum has a smell when you're that close, cleaner and old glue and something faintly sour that never quite leaves public buildings, and it filled my nose before I understood where I was. My tongue tasted wrong, sweet and metallic, like the drink had followed me down. I tried to lift my head, but it didn't happen. My neck answered late, heavy, like it belonged to someone else. Voices floated above me, stretched thin and warped, like they were coming from underwater. Someone asked if I could hear them. Someone else said my name, pulling it long, bending it around the edges. Another voice cut through, sharper this time, telling someone to call 911. I wanted to answer, wanted to give them something, a word, a sound, anything. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. The effort alone made my head throb. Not pain exactly, more like pressure, a weight settling behind my eyes. I focused on the floor because it was the only thing that felt real. There was a small black scuff mark inches from my nose, shaped like a comma, and I stared at it like it mattered, like if I paid enough attention it could anchor me. Someone knelt beside me, close enough that I felt the air shift, the faint heat of a body hovering near. A hand paused above my shoulder, unsure whether to touch. The room felt farther away now, like it had grown longer while I wasn't looking. Then I heard heels. Click, click, click. They moved closer, steady and unhurried, not rushing, not stumbling. The sound stopped just short of me, and I didn't need to look to know who it was. My daughter-in-law stood somewhere near my head. I could feel her presence the way you feel someone watching you from behind. "Is he breathing?" she asked, and her voice was calm, too calm. Someone answered yes, that I was breathing, and after a small pause, she said, "Good." That word landed heavier than it should have. I forced my eyes open, and the lights overhead sliced into me, bright and unforgiving. My vision fractured into white shapes bleeding into yellow halos, faces hovering above me, stretched and unfamiliar. Then I saw her. She stood just outside the small circle of concern, hands folded neatly in front of her, heels planted firm on the floor, posture perfect. Her face wasn't panicked or scared. It was relieved, not fully, just enough to notice, like something had gone according to plan. The realization slid into me slow and cold. I tried to speak again, to say her name, to say anything, but my tongue felt thick and uncooperative. A man's face appeared closer, gray hair, kind eyes, one of my coworkers, and he told me not to try to talk, that help was on the way. Help echoed oddly in my head. Someone pressed something cool against my wrist, checking my pulse, counting while my heart felt distant, like it was working somewhere far away. I blinked and the room slid sideways with the movement, like a bad camera pan. "Dad!" That voice cut through everything else. My son pushed into view, face pale, eyes wide, dropping to his knees beside me without caring who he bumped. His hand closed around mine, warm and solid, and I focused on that pressure, the familiar shape of his fingers. I wanted to squeeze back, to let him know I felt him, but my hand barely moved. His face crumpled anyway, like he saw it in my eyes. He asked what happened, said I'd been fine a minute ago, and nobody answered right away. The music had stopped, I noticed that suddenly, and the silence felt exposed, too big. Someone cried softly near the wall. Someone whispered a prayer they probably didn't usually say out loud. My daughter-in-law stepped closer and said she'd given me water, that I'd said I was dizzy. Her voice didn't shake, not even a little. My son looked at her, confused, desperate for something to make sense, and asked what she meant. She shrugged lightly, like it wasn't a big thing, and said the room had felt warm. That part was true, technically. The floor felt colder now, seeping through my cheek and jaw. I wanted to close my eyes, but I kept them open and watched her. She caught me looking, and for just a second something flickered across her face, not fear, but calculation, before the pleasant mask slid back into place. Sirens drifted in from far away, muffled by walls and distance, but getting closer. Someone said my name louder this time and asked me to squeeze their hand. I tried. Nothing happened. Panic fluttered low in my chest, small and contained, like an animal trapped under a box. Hands slid under my shoulders and knees, lifting me, and the movement made my stomach roll as the room lurched violently. I groaned beside myself, the sound low and animal, and someone told me I was doing good. They laid me onto a stretcher, vinyl cold and sticky beneath me, a strap tightening across my chest. As they wheeled me toward the doors, I caught one last glimpse of the room, folding chairs knocked askew, the cake table half empty, the retirement banner sagging further, one corner finally giving up. My son walked alongside the stretcher, one hand gripping the rail, the other shaking. She followed a few steps behind, phone already in her hand, still calm, still composed. The doors burst open, and night air rushed in sharp and cold, hitting my lungs like a shock. The sirens were deafening now. I stared up at the dark sky, at a single flickering streetlight above the parking lot, as the world narrowed to that point of light and the steady beep of a monitor near my head. As they lifted me into the ambulance, my daughter-in-law leaned close, too close, and told me softly that I was going to be okay. Her breath smelled like mint. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, about more than just that, but the doors slammed shut and the sirens wailed again. As the ambulance pulled away, one thought settled in heavy and undeniable. People who are scared look messy. She didn't, and that scared me more than the long way down ever could.
The hospital lights were already on when I opened my eyes, too bright and too white, like they were trying to scrub something out of me. I lay still for a moment, letting the sound come back first, the steady beeping, soft footsteps, a cart rolling somewhere down the hall. Then the smell hit, bleach and burnt coffee, that sharp, tired scent hospitals always carry, like they've been awake too long. My mouth tasted worse now. The sweetness had sharpened, turned bitter at the edges, still clinging no matter how many times I swallowed. "Sir," a voice said close to my ear, "can you hear me?" I nodded, or at least I think I did. My head felt wrapped in cotton. A nurse leaned into view, hair pulled tight, eyes kind but focused, clipboard held like it mattered more than comfort. She asked my name, where I was, what day it was. I answered slowly, each word dragging like furniture across carpet. A man in a white coat stood at the foot of the bed, calm and alert, lifting a small light to study my pupils. "Follow my finger," he said, and I did, careful not to move too fast. My son sat a few feet away in a plastic chair that looked like it had molded itself around him. His back was straight, too straight, hands locked together like he was holding something fragile. His eyes were red, not crying now, just used up. He watched every movement around me, like if he paid close enough attention he could fix it. I met his eyes and said, "Hey." The words sounded small in that room. He leaned forward immediately, voice cracking when he answered back, telling me I'd scared them. I tried to smile and apologized, meaning more than one thing. The nurse adjusted the IV at my side, clear liquid dripping slow and steady into my arm. "That should help," she said, and help felt like a big word. The doctor stepped closer and said they were going to run some tests, just to be safe. He hesitated before asking if anyone had seen what I'd had to drink. I thought of the cup, the ice melting too fast, the taste that wouldn't leave. "Yeah," I said, "I had a drink." My son asked what kind. I didn't know. I told them it tasted wrong, sweet, metallic. The doctor's eyes flicked to the nurse, then back to me. "We're going to run toxicology," he said. The word landed heavy. "Toxicology?" my son repeated. The doctor said it was routine given the symptoms, but routine didn't sound right. The lights buzzed overhead, relentless, and the taste came back sharper now that I wasn't distracted, coating my tongue like residue. I swallowed hard. The doctor explained it could be dehydration, a reaction to alcohol, or something else entirely. Something else. The words hung there. The curtain rustled as someone passed by. A baby cried down the hall. A monitor beeped faster, then slowed. Time stretched thin. I realized then that my daughter-in-law wasn't in the room. My son said she was parking, that she'd be right back. I nodded and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the tiny holes in one until I lost track. I knew this wasn't an accident. I'd had enough drinks in my life to recognize the difference. This was something else. If this wasn't an accident, then what was it? The question didn't come with drama, just wait. Footsteps approached, and the curtain shifted. She stepped in and paused just inside the room, eyes taking everything in, the IV, the monitors, me, before arranging her face into concern too quickly. "Oh my God," she said softly. "There you are." She touched my arm lightly, careful to avoid the IV, and asked how I was feeling. "Tired," I said. She nodded and turned to my son, steady and helpful, repeating that they were running tests. When he said toxicology, she blinked once, then smiled. "That makes sense. Better safe than sorry." She sat down and settled, too settled. The doctor returned and said they were still waiting on results, but had found something. My son straightened. The doctor explained my blood alcohol level was low, lower than expected for the symptoms I'd shown. Silence filled the room. My daughter-in-law's hand stilled completely. The doctor said this didn't look like simple intoxication, and that they were treating it as a possible ingestion. She laughed softly and asked if that meant food poisoning. The doctor didn't answer right away. "Possibly," he said, "but not likely." I closed my eyes and the taste flared again, vivid and undeniable. Pennies, cough syrup, intent. The doctor and nurse left, the curtains settling behind them. My son stared at the floor, hands clenched until his knuckles went white. I looked at my daughter-in-law. She didn't look back. If this wasn't an accident, the question echoed in the bright, unforgiving light.
And somewhere between the beeping machines and the smell of bleach, I realized that whatever had been poured into my glass hadn't just taken my balance, it had taken my trust. I didn't yet know how badly that was going to hurt.
The house sounded different when we got home, like it was holding its breath. Every footstep echoed too long, every door click felt sharp. Even the refrigerator hum sounded louder than I remembered. I stood in the entryway for a second with the keys still in my hand, unsure where to go. Hospitals tell you when to lie down. Homes expect you to remember on your own. My son set his keys in the bowl by the door, the same place they'd always gone, and the clink made him flinch. He told me to sit, and I did, the couch cushions sighing under my weight like they were relieved I'd finally made it back. The living room lamp cast a soft yellow pool of light, leaving the rest of the room dim, familiar but off, like a photograph taken from the wrong angle. She moved around the kitchen quietly, too quietly. I heard the stove click on, a cabinet open, a spoon stirring. She said she was making soup, her voice gentle and careful. My son said that was nice. He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, hands still locked together like earlier. He asked if I was okay. I told him I was here. He nodded like that answered it. The smell of broth drifted in, chicken, carrots, comfort. She carried the bowl in like it was fragile and set it on the coffee table in front of me. She told me to go slow. Her eyes stayed on the bowl, not on me. I lifted the spoon and watched the steam curl up, warm against my face. I thanked her. She smiled, small and quick, then apologized in a whisper. My son looked at her, really looked, and said it was just a scare, that we didn't even know what happened yet. She agreed too fast. Exactly, she said. The apology sat between us and didn't land. She busied herself straightening things that didn't need it, pillows, magazines, a coaster already aligned. I watched her hands shake just a little. Then she said she'd take the trash out. My son said it was late. She said it would only take a minute. She grabbed the bag and left without looking back, the door closing softly behind her. Silence dropped into the room like dust. My son exhaled and rubbed his face, said she'd been worried sick, that she'd thought she'd done something wrong. I stared at the soup, the surface gone still, and asked quietly if she had. He looked at me confused and asked what I meant. I shook my head and said nothing. That night the house creaked and settled like it always did, but sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, the taste came back, sweet, metallic. I lay there listening to the clock tick down the minutes, waiting for morning. It came too fast. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, striping the walls. Dust floated in the air. Normal. I got up slowly, joints stiff, head heavy, my body feeling like it had been rearranged without permission. The kitchen smelled clean, too clean. Counters wiped bare, no crumbs, no rings. She stood at the sink rinsing a mug that was already spotless. She said, "Good morning." I said it back. My son sat at the table scrolling his phone, coffee untouched. She asked how I was feeling. I said better. Not a lie, not the whole one either. She said she should have watched me closer, made sure I ate more. My son nodded and said it was probably just alcohol on an empty stomach. Probably. I noticed the space on the counter where a small bottle usually sat. Gone. I asked if she'd moved something. She said she'd thrown it out, that it was empty. Empty. My son didn't look up. I nodded and filed it away. Later, I went into the garage under the excuse of getting air. The trash bin sat at the curb, lid closed. I lifted it. The bag sat on top, tied tight and heavy. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. That night, I heard the door open again, soft and careful. I checked the clock, 1:12 a.m. Footsteps, then silence.
In the morning, the bin was gone, collected early. The counter gleamed again. Too much. She avoided my eyes more now, moving around me instead of past me. She offered soup again at dinner. I declined. My son watched us both, tension creeping into his shoulders, and asked if we were okay. She said yes too quickly. I hesitated, then said yes too. The lie tasted familiar now. Days passed like that, quiet, polite, tight. I noticed small things, a missing bottle, a peeled label, a receipt crumpled deep in the trash. She apologized in soft ways, cooking more, checking on me, touching my arm gently as she passed, but none of it landed right. My son tried harder, laughed louder, told stories like before. I smiled when he did, because I loved him, because I knew what the truth would cost. Trust thinned, stretched to breaking. One night I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan as it traced slow circles. How do you accuse someone you once welcomed into your family? How do you say the words out loud when they could split everything down the middle? I didn't have answers yet. Just the taste, the silence, and the feeling that whatever had been poured into my glass had seeped deeper than my bloodstream. It had soaked into the house itself, and something was going to have to break.
The receipt fell out when I wasn't looking for it. That's how most truths seem to arrive. I'd pulled my jacket off the back of the chair, the same one I wore to the party, the same one that still smelled faintly like cake and hospital soap, planning to hang it up and move on with my day. Paper slid free and drifted down, landing near my foot like it had weight. I stared at it for a second before bending to pick it up. I didn't rush. Something in me already knew better. It was folded small and careful, the kind of fold you make when you don't want something seen. I sat down at the kitchen table without thinking, the chair scraping softly across the tile, the sound loud in the quiet house. Morning light poured in through the window, sharp and clean, splitting the room straight down the middle, one half bright, the other still asleep. I unfolded the paper. A pharmacy logo stared back at me. The date was stamped clear as day. Late afternoon, the same day as the party. My name wasn't on it. Items were circled in blue ink, the pressure heavy and deliberate. My eyes moved slow, too slow, but I read them anyway. I didn't say the names out loud. I didn't need to. My stomach dropped, not sudden, but gradual, like an elevator easing past the ground floor. I checked the time again, then the total, then the circles. I leaned back and let the chair hold me. The house stayed quiet, too quiet for what had just happened. This didn't happen by accident. The thought settled in me with a calm that scared me more than panic ever could. I stared at the receipt, sunlight bleaching one half white, while the rest stayed stubbornly dark, like a half-truth refusing to go all the way. I thought about her movements that night, the way she floated through the room, the confidence in her hands, the way she didn't rush when I went down. I folded the receipt back up, then unfolded it again, like the words might change. They didn't. I stood and filled a glass with water at the sink, drinking it slow, letting the cold ground me. When I set the glass down, my hands shook, not from fear, but anger. I pulled my phone from my pocket and sat back at the table. The chair felt harder now. I typed carefully, choosing words that didn't give too much away. Just symptoms, just interactions, metallic taste, dizziness, loss of balance, sweet aftertaste. The results loaded faster than I wanted them to. I read quietly, scrolling and cross-checking. Every line tightened something in my chest. The names from the receipt came up again and again, paired with warnings, side effects, and interactions with alcohol. I closed the browser, opened it again, typed different words. Same answers. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling, the air thick and unmoving. This wasn't about a mistake. This wasn't carelessness. This was intention. The realization didn't hit like a punch. It crept in slow and cold. I thought about money,
the quiet conversations I wasn't meant to hear, the tension that crept in whenever bills came up. I thought about control, the way she liked things done a certain way, the way she corrected my son without raising her voice. I thought about resentment, how it can live under smiles for years, growing and waiting. I thought about my retirement party, my night, and wondered if it had ever really been about me at all. Footsteps sounded down the hall, light and careful. She appeared in the doorway, hair pulled back, phone in her hand. She said she didn't know I was up. I slid the receipt closer to myself, kept it flat on the table. I said good morning. She smiled, that same practiced one, and told me I should be resting. I said I couldn't sleep. She stepped into the kitchen and poured herself coffee, not noticing the way my eyes tracked every movement now. Her mug clinked softly against the counter. She wiped a spot that wasn't there. She asked if everything was okay. I looked at her, really looked, the sunlight catching her face just right, half shadow and half sun. I asked if she'd gone to the pharmacy the day of the party. The question landed clean. No edge, no accusation. She froze for just a beat, then laughed lightly and said yes, she'd grabbed a few things. I asked what she got. Her eyes flicked to the table, then back at me. She said normal stuff, vitamins, cold medicine. I placed the receipt between us, didn't slide it, just set it down. The room seemed to shrink. Her smile thinned but didn't vanish. She said she was going to throw it out. I asked why the items were circled. Silence filled the space, the clock ticking loud now. She sat down slowly, folded her hands, and told me I was overthinking. That phrase, the one people use when they want the conversation to end. I didn't raise my voice. I told her I tasted it, whatever was in that glass. I told her I'd looked it up, that everything on the receipt lined up. She swallowed. She said this was crazy, that I passed out and that happens. I asked quietly if it happens to me. She didn't answer. I leaned back in my chair and said, this could ruin us. Her voice softened when she warned me, not with fear, but calculation. Us didn't sit right. I told her I didn't ask for this. She looked toward the window, the sunlight still splitting the room. She said I didn't know what it was like. I asked her what it was like. She shook her head, stood up, said she wasn't doing this, and walked out of the kitchen with quicker footsteps. I stayed where I was, the receipt still on the table. When my son came home later, he saw my face and knew. I held up the receipt. He read it slowly, once, then again. His shoulders slumped. He started to say it didn't mean anything, then stopped. I told him I knew what it meant. He sat down hard, ran a hand through his hair, said she wouldn't, but the words didn't sound strong anymore. I told him I didn't want to see it either. Silence filled the room again, thicker than before. My hands finally steadied, not because the anger left, but because it settled. I thought about the toast, the smile, the relief on her face when I hit the floor. Was the celebration ever meant to be one, or was it just the moment she thought she'd tipped the scales in her favor? I folded the receipt one last time, careful and precise. Some things, once seen, don't go back, and as the sunlight shifted across the kitchen floor, I realized this wasn't the end of my working life. It was the beginning of a reckoning.
The house felt smaller after midnight, like the walls had leaned in once everyone stopped pretending. The clock on the stove read 12:37, its blue numbers casting the only light in the kitchen besides the lamp over the sink. Everything else stayed dark on purpose. She sat across from me at the table, hands folded, back straight, like she was waiting for a verdict. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Silence does more work than shouting ever could. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, and somewhere down the hall the house creaked the way it always did when the temperature shifted. I laid the receipt between us again, the same place as before. She didn't look at it this time. I told her she knew why we were there. She exhaled slowly and said I was making this bigger than it was. I nodded once and asked her to explain it to me. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, toward where my son stood just out of sight, pretending not to listen. We both knew he was there. She said it was a misunderstanding, that she didn't think, then stopped when I told her that wasn't true. Not loud, not angry, just certain. She said she was stressed, that I didn't know how much pressure she was under. Pressure again. I leaned back and let the chair creak. I told her what I knew. She bought something, put it in my drink. I passed out. I ended up in the hospital. She shook her head quickly and said she didn't mean for me to get hurt. The sentence landed wrong, too honest, too early, and I watched it register on her face the second she realized what she'd said. I told her that wasn't what I asked. Her hands tightened in her lap. She said she just wanted me to slow down, to listen. I asked her to what? She laughed softly, no humor in it, and said to everything, to how much my retirement changed things. There it was. She finally looked at the receipt. She said I didn't understand what happened now. My pension, my savings, the house. I stayed quiet. She said she wasn't trying to hurt me, and I asked her what it was about then. Her eyes filled, finally, and she said she was scared of losing control. The words came faster after that, less careful. She said I was always there, always helping him, always fixing things, always having a say. I heard my son shift in the doorway. The floor gave him away. She noticed too. She said she thought once I retired, things would finally be theirs. I asked her what she meant, and her voice broke when she said the word ours. Tears spilled then, real ones, but too late. I felt something twist in my chest, not sympathy, but grief. I asked if she was sorry for what she did, or for getting caught. She covered her face and said she didn't think it would be like that, didn't think I'd collapse. I closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, my son was standing fully in the doorway, his face pale and suddenly older. He asked what she did. She flinched and tried to explain, saying she just wanted me to rest, just wanted time. He laughed once, a sharp, broken sound, and said the word out loud. Drugged. It hung there, ugly and accurate. She reached for him, and he stepped back, telling her not to. That single word did more damage than anything else that night. The room felt empty all at once, like something vital had drained out of it. I stayed seated and didn't interrupt. This wasn't my moment anymore. My son ran a hand through his hair over and over and asked why she didn't just talk to us. She said she was afraid again, and there was no answer that didn't sound like what it was. He looked at me and said he didn't want to believe me. I told him he knew. That hurt him more than anger would have. The clock kept ticking, uninterested. Nothing exploded. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, just realization settling into bones. My son said he couldn't do this, not angry, just defeated, and told her she needed to leave that night. She said she had nowhere to go. He didn't answer. She turned to me then, eyes red, face stripped bare, and said she was sorry. I believed she was. I also knew it didn't change anything. I told her some things don't get fixed with apologies. She grabbed her coat and bag. The door opened and cold air rushed in. Before she stepped out, she said this didn't have to end like this. I watched her carefully and told her, yes, it did. The door closed behind her, soft and final. My son sank into the chair she had vacated, his hands shaking now. I sat beside him. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The house exhaled a long, tired breath. He asked if I could ever forgive her. I thought about the taste, the floor, the hospital light. I told him I didn't know. Forgiveness is a word people like to use before they understand the weight of what they're asking. Some breaks don't make noise. They just change the shape of everything forever. And as the night stretched on, quiet and irreversible, I realized this wasn't about anger anymore. It was about what survives when trust is gone, and whether love, once poisoned, can ever be poured clean again.
The banner came down last. I left it hanging longer than I needed to, crooked and faded, like if I didn't touch it, the memory might soften on its own. It didn't. The paper tore a little when I pulled the tape free, a quiet rip, nothing dramatic, just enough to leave a mark. Happy retirement.
The letters bent where the fold had lived too long, creases running through the blue like veins. I folded it carefully anyway. Old habits die slow. The house felt different now. Not empty exactly, just settled. No tight air, no careful footsteps, no sense that every word needed approval before it left my mouth. Calmer, safer. I carried the banner to the hall closet and slid it onto the top shelf beside old photo albums and a box of tax papers I never threw out. It fit in with the things you keep but don't look at anymore. The door clicked shut. I stood there with my hand on the knob, listening. Nothing pressed back. Afternoon light came in soft through the living room window, dust floating slow like it had nowhere else to be. I moved through the space unhurried, no audience, no tension humming under the floorboards. The kettle sat cold on the stove, unused. I reached for a glass instead. Clear. Simple. Water from the tap ran steady, catching the light. I watched it fill to the brim before turning it off. Didn't rush. Didn't spill. I held the glass there for a second, just looking. Clear liquid. No ice, no sweetness, no surprises. I raised it and took a sip. Cold. Clean. I swallowed slowly, present in my body in a way I hadn't been in weeks. The water went down easy. Honest. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where the receipt had rested, same chair, different weight. Outside, a car passed. Somebody laughed down the block. Life doing what it does without asking permission. My son was at work, going in earlier lately, staying later. Not to avoid the house, just learning how to be in it again. We talked more now. Not about what happened, not much anyway. Some things don't need revisiting every day to stay real. We'd cleared out the spare room together the week before, folded sheets, moved boxes. Neither of us said her name. The house didn't need it. I finished the water and set the glass down gently. No clink, no punctuation, just done. I leaned back and closed my eyes, let the quiet settle into my bones. I thought about the party, the paper plates, the applause that felt like an ending when it should have been a beginning. Life didn't end that night, but it sure changed lanes. I still wake up sometimes with the taste in my mouth, faint now, more memory than sensation. When that happens, I don't panic. I sit up, take a breath, remind myself where I am. Alert doesn't mean afraid. It just means awake. I've learned that. The mailbox creaked open later that afternoon. Bills, a flyer, nothing worth holding on to. I sorted through it slowly, methodical, the rhythm steadying. Later, I took a walk around the block, the same route I'd walked for years, just with different eyes. I noticed things I'd passed 100 times without seeing. A cracked sidewalk slab, a tree growing crooked around a fence post, a wind chime on a neighbor's porch singing off-key. I waved at a woman watering her lawn. She waved back. That was enough. When I came home, the house welcomed me the way it should. Quiet, neutral, mine. I poured another glass of water at dinner and drank it slow again. No toast this time. I don't need one. Some celebrations aren't meant to be loud. Some truths don't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes the loudest moment is the one where you realize you're still standing, still choosing, still here. I washed the glass and set it in the rack, watched it drip dry. Before bed, I checked the doors and locked them. Habit. The mirror in the hallway caught my reflection as I passed. I looked older than I did a month ago, but steadier. That counts for something. I turned off the lights one by one, leaving the house in its proper shadows, no corners hiding anything from me anymore. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and kicked off my shoes. The floor felt solid under my feet. I lay down and stared at the ceiling fan as it turned slow circles, unhurried and reliable. Tomorrow didn't feel threatening, just open. Some endings don't slam shut, they fade, quietly. and some beginnings don't announce themselves at all. They show up as a glass of water, a calm room, a man who knows now that paying attention is a form of survival. I closed my eyes, not to escape, just to rest, and somewhere in that stillness, I understood the toast was over, but the living, that part, had just begun. If you feel comfortable, I'd appreciate it if you left a like on this video. It helps these quiet stories reach the people who might need them most. You can subscribe to the channel if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories about love, endurance, and the things we carry longer than we should. And if you want to, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I read them, truly. Knowing this story traveled farther than my living room gives me more comfort than you might imagine. Thank you for sitting with me. Take care of yourself, and take care of the people you love.